I watched snow fall softly on Beacon Hill. I heard church bells ring in the distance. I noticed carolers laughing somewhere down the block. I felt the cold bite through my coat. My suitcase skidded across the icy front steps. I heard it scrape against the stone. I watched my mother Vivian lock the door behind me. I saw her face through the glass window. "Don't embarrass us tonight," she said. Her voice came muffled through the door. "We've told everyone you're traveling for work." I looked past her into the warm house. I saw my brother Bryce press his face to the window. I watched him smile at me. I noticed him lift a mug of mulled wine in mock celebration. Inside, my family gathered around the Christmas tree I'd paid for. I saw the lights twinkling. I noticed the presents piled underneath. I recognized the decorations I'd bought last week. Outside on Christmas Eve, I stood homeless. Officially uninvited. Publicly erased. I didn't knock on the door. I didn't beg to be let back in. I didn't cry or shout or make a scene. I just checked my watch. I noted the time. 7:32 in the evening on December 24th. They had 48 hours. They just didn't know it yet. I picked up my suitcase. I walked to my car parked at the curb. I got inside and started the engine. I turned on the heat and watched my family through the front window. They were laughing. They were celebrating. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. I sat in my car with the heat running. I watched my breath fog the windows. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket with messages I didn't read. "I want to ask you something. I need you to think carefully before you answer. I want you to really consider what you would do. If your family erased you on Christmas, if they locked you out in the snow and told everyone you chose to leave, if they took everything you'd given them and demanded more, but they forgot one critical detail, would you confront them immediately? Or would you let the calendar do the talking? Because Christmas has deadlines." I learned that 5 years ago. I discovered that holiday traditions have expiration dates and payment schedules and legal consequences. And so do trusts. So do property agreements. So do carefully worded contracts signed in moments of grief and gratitude. I reached across to my glove compartment. I opened it slowly. I pulled out a slim red folder I'd placed there this morning. I'd known I might need it. I'd prepared for this moment even though I'd hoped it wouldn't come. Inside the folder were statements, bank records, contracts, signatures, legal documents that told a very different story than the one my family believed. I didn't plan revenge. I never wanted this. I just planned protection. I built safety nets for myself because I'd learned something terrifying 5 years ago when my father died. Love disappears fast when money gets tight. Family becomes negotiation. Affection turns into transaction. So I created something quiet. Something boring to anyone who didn't look closely. Something that seemed like simple financial planning. I called it the Evergreen account. And tonight, it was about to serve its real purpose. My family loves Christmas. I learned that early. I understood they don't love the meaning or the spiritual significance. They love the spending, the appearance, the performance of perfect holiday joy. I kept records. I documented everything, not because I was suspicious at first, just because I'm careful with money, because I work in finance and tracking expenses is automatic for me. $18,000 for Bryce's startup Christmas launch party 3 years ago. $42,000 for Mom's holiday renovation last year. $9,500 for matching designer coats and scarves and professional family photos. Every December brought the same ritual. I received calls starting in October. I heard requests that sounded like traditions. I felt pressure that looked like family obligation. They didn't ask if I could afford it. They never questioned whether I had the money. They just asked when the transfer would clear. When could they expect the funds? How quickly could I move the money? I calculated the total last month. Over 7 years, I'd given them $611,000. Just for Christmas. Just for maintaining the appearance that we were a close, generous, perfect family. They called it tradition. They said it was what family did for each other. They told me I was investing in our relationships. I called it something else. I recognized it as leverage, as documentation, as proof that would matter later if I ever needed it. I just didn't know I'd need it this soon. People ask why I kept paying. I've thought about that question a lot. I've tried to explain it to myself in therapy. I've examined my own motivations until I understood the uncomfortable truth. Being needed feels like being loved, especially when you grow up learning that affection comes with conditions. When your family teaches you that closeness requires payment. When belonging means meeting financial expectations. I wasn't just their daughter. I was their December. Their Christmas miracle. Their solution to every holiday money problem. And for years, I convinced myself that was enough. I told myself that giving them what they needed meant they valued me. I believed that funding their Christmas dreams was how I earned my place at the table. I was wrong. I see that now. I understand that what I bought wasn't love. It was permission to exist in their lives. It was tolerance dressed up as tradition. But knowing that intellectually is different from feeling it emotionally. It's different from sitting in a locked car on Christmas Eve watching your family celebrate your absence. That's when understanding becomes action. When clarity becomes decision. When enough finally means enough. I opened the red folder again. I reviewed the documents I'd brought. I prepared myself for what would happen over the next 2 days. Not revenge. Never revenge. Just consequences. Just the natural result of choices they'd made and contracts they'd signed and leverage they'd forgotten existed. I was done being their December. I was reclaiming my name. Earlier that evening, before they locked me out, we'd all gathered for dinner. I remember the dining room smelled like pine and cinnamon. I noticed candles flickering on every surface. I saw the table set with Mom's best china. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt staged. Everything was performance. Bryce clinked his wine glass with his fork. I watched him stand at the head of the table. I saw Mom beam at him with pride. I recognized the setup before he even started speaking. "I have incredible news," he announced. His voice carried that practiced confidence he'd perfected. "My company is being acquired. A major tech firm. 8-figure deal." I watched Mom clasp her hands together. I heard her gasp with delight. I saw her look at me expectantly. "Bryce, that's wonderful," I said carefully. I meant it. I wanted good things for my brother. I always had. "But," he continued, and I felt my stomach tighten, "there's a small temporary liquidity issue. Just until the deal closes in January. I need to cover some bridge financing." He slid a document across the table toward me. I saw it coming before it reached my plate. I recognized what it was before I read a single word. $850,000, he said casually. Like it was a small favor. Like it was nothing. "Christmas miracle," Mom whispered. She looked at me with complete confidence that I would say yes. That I would solve this problem like I'd solved every other problem. I picked up the document. I started reading. I gave myself 2 minutes to review it thoroughly. That's all it took to see the truth. 2 minutes. That's how long I needed to understand what Bryce was actually asking for. I saw shell companies listed. I noticed inflated projections with no supporting data. I recognized a fake acquisition structure designed to hide something. "This acquisition doesn't exist," I said quietly. I kept my voice calm and professional. I set the document down carefully. "These are shell companies. This buyer isn't real. This is either fraud or you're hiding debt." I watched Bryce's smile disappear. I saw his expression shift from confidence to anger in seconds. I noticed Mom's face harden. "You've always been jealous of me," Bryce said. His voice turned cold. "You can't stand that I'm successful." I felt something crack inside me. Years of staying quiet. Years of funding his schemes. Years of covering his mistakes and believing his stories. "I'm not jealous," I replied evenly. "I'm careful. And this document is designed to defraud me." Mom's voice cut through the tension. "You're being dramatic and cruel. After everything this family has done for you. After we raised you and loved you and gave you everything." I looked at her carefully. I realized she actually believed that. She'd rewritten history so completely that she thought I owed them. "Sign the document," Mom said. Her voice wasn't asking. It was commanding. "Or don't come back to this house." I stood up slowly. I folded my napkin. I placed it beside my untouched plate. I guess you've made the choice for me, I said. I walked to the front door. I heard Bryce call after me. Good. We don't need you anyway. I grabbed my coat. I picked up the suitcase I'd packed that morning. I'd known this was coming. I'd felt it building. They locked the door behind me. They chose money over me. They chose Bryce's scheme over their daughter. They thought they'd won. They thought I'd break. They thought I'd come crawling back by morning. They were wrong. I sat in my car for an hour before my phone started buzzing. I watched notifications pile up. I saw messages appear on my screen. I opened the family group chat. I read what they were saying about me. I saw them rewrite what had just happened. Bryce wrote, "She finally showed her true colors. Selfish and cold." Mom added, "We'll tell the family she abandoned us on Christmas. That she chose money over family." Then a voicemail notification appeared. I pressed play. I heard Mom's voice. Sweet on the surface, but venomous underneath. "After everything we gave you, after all the sacrifices we made, you owe us this. You owe us everything. We made you who you are. And this is how you repay us? By abandoning your family on Christmas Eve." I played it again. I let every word sink in. I recognized the manipulation. I saw the gaslighting. I understood they genuinely believed this narrative they created. They thought I owed them. They believed I was the problem. They convinced themselves I was the ungrateful one. That's when I realized something important. Something that made my decision clear. They still thought I owed them anything. They still believed they had power over me. They still assumed I would eventually give in. They forgot one crucial detail. One fact they'd never bothered to verify. One piece of information that changed everything. I didn't just pay for Christmas every year. I paid for the house too. And they never knew it. 5 years ago, Dad died suddenly. Heart attack. No warning. I remember the funeral. I recall the grief that swallowed our family whole. Mom was devastated. Bryce was spiraling. Dad's business had failed 2 years earlier. There were debts. There were liens. There was the very real possibility we'd lose the family home. Mom couldn't handle the financial details. Bryce was too unstable. Someone needed to manage the crisis. Someone needed to solve the problem quietly. So I bought the house. I paid off the mortgage. I settled Dad's debts. I did it all through a limited liability company I'd created for my consulting work. I told them I'd arranged financing. I explained that the bank had agreed to restructure everything. I suggested they sign the paperwork quickly while the offer stood. They signed without reading past page 3. They were grateful. They were relieved. They trusted me to handle the complicated details. I placed one clause in the rental agreement, buried in the middle of the document, written in standard legal language that looked like boilerplate. Clause 12C. Misrepresentation, coercion, or removal of the property owner equals immediate termination of occupancy rights. Tonight, they'd removed me. They'd locked me out. They'd done it on video from their doorbell camera. On Christmas Eve. With clear audio of Mom's words and Bryce's laughter. They'd violated their lease agreement. They just didn't know they had a lease agreement. I made 2 phone calls. One to my lawyer. One to the sheriff's office. I explained the situation calmly. I provided documentation. I scheduled what would happen next. Then I drove to a hotel. I checked in. I ordered room service. I ate dinner alone on Christmas Eve. And I waited for morning. Christmas morning arrived cold and bright. I woke at dawn. I drove back to the house at 8 o'clock. I parked across the street. I watched and waited. At 8:30, 2 sheriff's vehicles pulled up. I saw neighbors start peeking through curtains. I noticed people stopping their morning walks. I observed the street fill with curious onlookers. An officer knocked on the door. I watched Mom answer in her Christmas robe. I saw confusion cross her face. I noticed Bryce appear behind her. The officer spoke. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the impact. I watched Mom's face go from confused to shocked to horrified. I stepped out of my car. I walked across the street. I approached the officer calmly. "I'm the property owner," I said clearly. I handed him the documents. Here's the deed. Here's the lease agreement they signed 5 years ago. Here's the violation notice based on last night's events. The officer reviewed everything. I watched him nod. I saw him turn back to Mom and Bryce. "Ma'am, you have 1 hour to vacate," he said. "This is a legal eviction based on lease violation." Inside the house, I heard something shatter. I recognized the sound of ornaments breaking. I heard Mom start crying. I listened to Bryce shouting. The Christmas tree lights blinked on and off through the window. Like a countdown. Like time running out. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt tired. Tired of being used. Tired of funding their fantasy. Tired of being the solution to every problem except my own. Bryce pushed past the officer. He came at me with fury in his eyes. I watched 2 officers step between us. I stood still and calm. "You planned this," he spat. "You've been waiting for this moment." I looked at him steadily. "No," I said quietly. "I prevented worse." I took a breath. I decided to tell him the truth. The truth he'd never known because I'd protected him from consequences his entire life. 3 years ago, your first startup failed. You committed securities fraud trying to save it. Fake investors. Fabricated numbers. Federal investigators started asking questions. I watched his face change. I saw recognition dawn. I noticed the officers listening. "I paid the lawyers," I continued. "I settled with the victims. I buried the evidence before it reached federal court. I saved you from prison, Bryce. I've spent 3 years protecting you from the consequences of your own choices." I gestured at the house. "This isn't revenge. This is me finally stopping. This is me choosing not to save you again. This is mercy. Just not the kind you expected." Mom grabbed Bryce's arm. She pulled him back toward the house. "We need to pack," she said. Her voice sounded broken. I turned to the officer. "I'll wait in my car." I sat and watched them load suitcases. I observed them carry boxes. I saw them empty the house of their belongings while leaving behind everything I'd paid for. The Christmas tree stayed. The decorations remained. The presents sat unopened under branches I'd decorated. By 10 o'clock, they were gone. 2 cars loaded with their possessions. No goodbye. No apology. Just silence and shock and the weight of choices finally catching up. That evening, I walked into the house alone. I smelled pine and cinnamon still lingering. I heard floorboards creak under my feet. I noticed the silence felt different. Peaceful instead of tense. I built a fire in the fireplace. I turned on the Christmas tree lights. I made hot cocoa the way my father used to make it, with real chocolate and a touch of cinnamon. I sat in Dad's old chair. I looked at the tree. I thought about all the Christmases I'd funded, all the years I'd paid for belonging, all the times I'd bought permission to be part of my own family. My phone buzzed. I saw messages from relatives. Angry messages from Mom's side. Shocked messages from people who'd heard what happened. Accusations that I'd ruined Christmas. I turned off my phone. I closed the Evergreen account. I made a list of what would happen next. The house would be renovated and sold. The money would go into investments for myself. My future. My life. Not their December. Not their Christmas miracle. Mine. I pulled out a photo album. I found pictures of Dad. I saw him young and smiling. I remembered him teaching me about money, about contracts, about protecting yourself. "You'd understand," I whispered to his picture. "You'd know why I had to do this." Outside, snow fell gently. I heard carols playing from a neighbor's house. I smelled cookies baking somewhere nearby. For the first time in 7 years, Christmas didn't cost me anything. It didn't require payment or performance or pretending. It didn't demand I shrink myself to fit someone else's expectations. I reclaimed my name. I took back the season. I chose myself over them. People ask if I have regrets. They want to know if I feel guilty. They question whether family is worth losing over money. But they misunderstand what happened. This was never about money. Money was just the tool, the measurement, the way they quantified my worth and tested my boundaries. This was about being erased, about being reduced to a bank account with a name attached, about learning that love came with invoices and affection had a payment plan. I spent 7 years being their December, their Christmas solution, their financial miracle. I paid $611,000 to belong to my own family. And when I finally said no, when I finally drew a boundary, when I finally asked them to value me as a person instead of a resource, they locked me out in the snow. So I let them discover what they'd forgotten. I let the contracts speak. I let the consequences arrive. I let them learn that the daughter they'd erased actually owned the ground beneath their feet. Some people call it revenge. I call it protection. Self-preservation. The natural result of choices they made freely. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped saving them. I stopped funding their fantasy. I stopped pretending that paying for everything meant I mattered. Now I sit in a house that's finally mine. Not theirs. Not ours. Mine. I celebrate Christmas on my own terms. I spend money on things that bring me joy instead of buying acceptance. The evergreen account is closed. The leverage is spent. The protection served its purpose. And for the first time in my adult life, Christmas means something real. Not performance. Not payment. Not proving my worth through my wallet. Just peace. Just freedom. Just me. They gave away my name that Christmas Eve. They erased me from their story. They locked me out of their celebration. So, I took back my name. I rewrote my story. I built my own celebration. And I've never looked back.